Episode 41, Thunderclap, Part 2. In a flashback, Yuji Itadori remembers his grandfather asking him to help others. In the present, Sukuna, in Yuji's body, looks over the destroyed remains of Shibuya while standing atop Jogo's maximum meteor. Earlier, at 11:05 p.m. in the Dogenzaka area in front of Shibuya 109, Haruta Shigemo stalks a critically injured Megumi Fushiguro as the latter divulges the mechanics of his Ten Shadows technique while walking away before eventually collapsing. The curse user thinks nothing of Megumi's explanation and is momentarily distracted by the impact of Maximum Meteor in the distance. However, Megumi then reveals his plan to summon a Shikigami that has never been tamed and force Shigemo to participate in the exorcism ritual with him, his last resort to take the curse user down with himself. Remembering Satoru Gojo informing him why the Gojo clan and the Zenin clan do not get along, Megumi surmises that the leader of the Zenin family hundreds of years ago used the Ten Shadows technique the same way to kill himself and the leader of the Gojo family. As the area around Shigemo and Megumi darken and the curse user hurriedly rushes towards Megumi, the student chants, "With this treasure I summon." Sukuna senses Megumi's cursed energy from afar and orders Uraume to continue their preparation for when he regains his freedom. After Sukuna leaves, Uraume declares that they will always await the King of Curses' return. As light returns to the area, divine dogs and toads manifest in front of Megumi before disappearing to unveil the shell of a humanoid Shikigami wrapped and restrained in metal cables behind him. As Shigemo silently realizes that he was forced to take part in an exorcism ritual, Megumi reveals the Shikigami's name: Eight-Handled Sword Divergent Sila Divine General Mahoraga. The cables break apart as smoke bursts out of the shell and it begins to crumble. As four wings sprout out of the shell, Megumi silently apologizes to Yuji before mocking Shigemo by wishing him good luck. He is then struck aside by Mahoraga, crashing him into a nearby building and leaving him in a state of suspended death. Panicking, Shigemo backs away from the approaching Shikigami. As he curses Megumi, Mahoraga raises his hand and crushes Shigemo under it. A brief flashback is then shown, explaining Shigemo's innate technique, Miracles. Miracles functions by erasing his memories of tiny miracles in his daily life and storing them as markings under his eyes. These miracles are then released during critical situations to save Shigemo's life. However, all 6 miracles he stored were expended during his confrontation with Kento Nanami. Back to the present, it is revealed that Shigemo was saved by Sukuna at the last moment. Standing beside Megumi's unconscious body, Sukuna surmises that the young sorcerer is in a state of suspended death during the exorcism ritual, and Shigemo's death would have ended the ritual and caused Megumi to permanently die had he not saved him. Using reverse cursed technique, Sukuna heals Megumi and confronts Mahoraga himself. Mahoraga extends the Sword of Extermination out of its right arm and slashes down on Sukuna, who blocks it while the shockwave shatters the glass of buildings nearby. The sword then emits positive energy, causing Sukuna to quickly move out of its way and punch Mahoraga in the face. As the Shikigami reels from the attack, Sukuna attacks it with Dismantle, slashing deep gashes into its body and the building behind it. Mahoraga and Sukuna then attack each other at the same time. Their attacks send both of them crashing into buildings away from each other. Sukuna walks out of the building he crashed into while drinking soda and carrying a pot of popcorn. Recognizing the Sword of Extermination attached to Mahoraga and its function, Sukuna believes that if he were a cursed spirit, a strike from the sword would have killed him. After tasting the popcorn and finding it terrible, he slashes Mahoraga across the chest again with his cursed technique. The Shikigami then grabs Sukuna and jumps, dragging him across a building before throwing him towards another. Mahoraga continues its pursuit as Sukuna backflips up the building, eventually reaching the roof. Mahoraga attempts to slam Sukuna with a hammer fist, but Sukuna dodges and kicks it in the face. When the Shikigami grabs Sukuna in response, he slashes apart its arm into several pieces and then cuts off its left foot. The Shikigami quickly gathers air in its body before unleashing it as an airburst, sending Sukuna crashing through several buildings. Safely landing on a building, Sukuna takes out and throws away one of Mahoraga's fingers that ended up in his hoodie. The Shikigami quickly approaches him and slams him down with its own severed foot. As the two crash into a building, Mahoraga unleashes a barrage of punches on Sukuna, who blocks every strike while slashing apart the building they are in. As the building collapses, Mahoraga is launched into the air and quickly restrained by Sukuna using a cable, who proceeds to throw it into a parking garage. As Sukuna jumps after the Shikigami, Mahoraga grabs the cars around it and throws them at Sukuna, who slashes them all apart before unleashing a more powerful slash that cuts apart Mahoraga's head. The sound of the wheel behind Mahoraga's head turning is heard as it is then shown to have completely healed its head, making Sukuna wonder what it did. The two continue, with the sounds of their battle reverberating throughout Shibuya. As a terrified Shigemo tries to run away, a car lands in front of him, dissuading him from escaping. Sukuna and Mahoraga's fight cut apart several buildings before they arrive at an evacuation zone with many people nearby. As Mahoraga crashes through the building, Sukuna kills the people around them, before placing his hand on the Shikigami and slicing it multiple times. The building they were in subsequently collapses, causing them to fall into an underground parking lot. As Sukuna looks over a bloodied and defeated Mahoraga, he thinks of its strange response to his cursed technique. The Shikigami then gets back on its feet and attempts to strike Sukuna with its sword of extermination again. However, Sukuna catches the sword with a fanged mouth he created on his neck, which bites and shatters the sword. He then strikes Mahoraga and launches it above ground before sending it crashing into a laundry detergent store. The poisonous gas created by the detergents cause Mahoraga to vomit, and the wheel above its head glows and turns in response. The battle between Sukuna and Mahoraga rages throughout Shibuya, destroying countless infrastructure and ending the lives of even more people. During the fight, Sukuna infers that Mahoraga's ability allows it to adapt to all phenomenon, after observing it being able to react to his slashes and using cursed energy to attack him, when it previously used the positive energy in the Sword of Extermination instead. As an enlarged Mahoraga reaches for Sukuna, the King of Curses activates his domain expansion, Malevolent Shrine. Malevolent Shrine, unlike most domain expansions, does not create a separate space for the innate domain and enclose it with a barrier. Instead, it manifests Sukuna's innate domain without a barrier, akin to painting directly in the air instead of on a canvas. As a result of the domain expansion allowing an escape route, a binding vow is created that increases the domain's radius up to a maximum radius of nearly 200 meters. Taking Megumi's location into account, Sukuna narrows down the range of his domain expansion to a radius of 140 meters and above ground. An endless series of slashes subsequently reduces all within that range to dust, destroying a significant portion of Shibuya. However, Mahoraga manages to withstand the relentless slashes of Malevolent Shrine and walks towards Sukuna. In response, before Mahoraga can regenerate, Sukuna finishes off the Shikigami with the same flaming arrow technique he used to exorcise Jogo, assuming that the Shikigami already adapted to his slashing techniques. The immense explosion caused by the flames creates a pillar of fire in the midst of the destroyed city, concluding the ritual and the catastrophic battle. A dumbfounded Yuji is briefly shown staring at something. Back to the present, Mahoraga's wheel rolls onto the ground before dissolving into liquid shadows. As Sukuna walks past a horrified Shigemo, he orders the curse user to get lost. Overjoyed that he escaped death once again, Shigemo thanks Sukuna and runs into the crater left by Malevolent Shrine, which spells his death as he is then slashed in half by the domain expansion's persisting effects. Noticing that Yuji is regaining control over his body, Sukuna takes Megumi to where Shoko, Yeri, and Masamichi Yaga are located before returning to the area in front of Shibuya 109. Sukuna tells Yuji to take a good look at the destruction he caused as Yuji regains control. Once Yuji regains control of his body, he immediately recalls everyone who was killed or put in danger by Sukuna, causing him to vomit before panicking and screaming at himself to die. After a few moments of reeling from the traumatic experience, Yuji enters a state of cold focus, realizing that he has to fight and help people or else he's nothing but a murderer. Meanwhile, with half of his body burned by Jogo and missing an eye, a heavily injured Kento Nanami walks down a hallway in Shibuya Station.